Good evening. So, in a room full of young people, I'm pretty sure that inequality is a concern that many people have. We have all heard about the 99% and the 1% and all these sources of unfairness and inequality in the world we live in. I want to focus on a particular one: the inequality between countries and regions of the world. The average American is about 5 times richer than the average Hungarian or Chilean, about 10 times richer than the average Peruvian, about 33 times richer than the average Indian, and at about 100 times richer than the average Eritrean or Somalian. These are huge differences in income. Now, if you ask yourself, what underpins these huge differences in income? Well, the economists have tried to explain it, looking at things, the difference in schooling or difference in the amount of capital that these countries have, and they found out that these things don't really explain these huge gaps. And they have agreed to explain these huge gaps by differences in something that they call technology that underpins these huge differences in productivity. So the problem in the world is not so much that there is a pie that is very unevenly shared, but that there are places where they bake really, really small pies and other places that bake really, really big pies. So the question is, what can be done so that the world bakes bigger pies? Now that goes into answering what is technology. Why are some places have little or lousy technologies and other places have a lot of technologies? Well, I think that the word technology is a particularly confusing word, and I would like to invite you to think of it as 3 very different substances. One substance is tools, like your cell phone or your computer, or like an antibiotic. Another thing that technology is codes, recipes, blueprints. Now, if this were to explain these huge differences in income, it means that it's difficult to move tools around. But it's not. It's much easier even to move codes around because we can put it on the web and they move even faster. But there's a third component of technology, and that is know-how. And know-how is a substance that only exists as a particular wiring of the brain. It doesn't have any other material existence. Know-how involves the ability of the brain to perform tasks without comprehending how it performs those tasks. You know how to walk, but you don't really understand what it is that you do when you walk. You don't know what muscles you're moving. You don't know what about what you do keeps your balance. So know-how is this complicated thing that cannot be transmitted by talking about it. You don't teach walking to your children by explaining the concepts. Know-how is acquired through imitation and repetition and imitation and repetition, and that is the reason why it takes us so long to learn an instrument, to learn a language. And as a consequence, know-how is the slowly diffusing part of technology. And that is what makes technological flows so slow. Now, knowledge and know-how have grown enormously since Harvard was founded in 1636. Remember that 1636 was before Newton, before Lavoisier, before Darwin, before Einstein, before Keynes. So we have a lot more knowledge and a lot more know-how to teach. Now, in 1636, a college degree lasted 4 years. How long does it last now? Still 4 years, even though we have so much more to teach. How come? Well, essentially because now we teach 50 different majors. So there's so much knowledge in the world and there's so much know-how in the world that it doesn't fit in a single head. So we have to spread it across many heads. Now, in order to use this know-how in the world today, we need to create teams of people with different know-how to make the things we make. Now, that makes us all feel incredibly inept. Our ancestors knew how to make their own food, their own clothing, their own homes. We are useless. We don't know how to make any of that. We don't know how to make our clothes. We don't know how to make our computers. We don't even know how to make our video games. But we live in societies where we can put together teams that know how to do these things. Individually, we are as useless as an individual anesthesiologist. He can only put people to sleep, like lecturers. In a surgical team, they may be particularly useful. Right? So the question now is, we want this technology to diffuse to make the world a more equal place, but know-how is the slow-moving part. Now, what makes the movement of know-how so slow is also that it's not about just moving know-how of one particular kind. You know, if you have a violinist, he can train another violinist. Now, how do you train an oboist if you don't have an oboist that knows how to play the oboe to begin with? So the slow process of expanding know-how is that it is hard to expand the new stuff into a system if there isn't anybody who knows it. So at a societal level, know-how expands not because every individual is a genius, but because every individual knows different. They learned a different major. And by expanding the variety of knowledge in the society, you can do things that require much more knowledge, not because it's a society of geniuses, but because there is a distribution of knowledge in society that makes the whole smarter than any of its parts. Now, how do we expand the amount of knowledge in society? In a particular society, in a particular location, in a particular region, or in a particular city? Well, it's difficult because you cannot do new things that you don't know how to do. And you don't know how to do the things you don't do. This is a fundamental chicken and egg problem. You cannot make watches without watchmakers. And you cannot learn to become a watchmaker in a place that doesn't make watches. So how is this conundrum solved? We have found two avenues through which this conundrum is solved, and these are very important avenues. The first one is that a society cannot move from making, say, cocoa to making airplanes in one fell swoop, because there's too much missing know-how in between. So societies evolve by doing things that are not too far away in a know-how sense from the things that they are already doing. They move on to new things that can use the know-how that's already in the system, and maybe with some extra bits that we're missing and that we'll somehow figure out so we can solve that chicken and egg problem. So countries move from where they are to what you might want to call their adjacent possible. And figuring out what the adjacent possible is a fundamental idea. Finding out where are these stepping stones that can make the acquisition of more know-how faster is one key puzzle that we need to address. And the second idea is that it is much easier to move brains than it is to move know-how into brains. You know, it takes an airplane can put a person within a day any part in the world. Malcolm Gladwell says it takes 10,000 hours to become good at something. So it's much easier to move brains than it is to move know-how into brains. So what we find is that know-how moves because brains move. So immigration policy, human mobility, diasporas, business travel, study abroad, all of these things move know-how around in the world. So if we want to make the world a more equal place, let's start moving our brains around. Thank you very much.